Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do see that it is 4:47 p.m. and our streaming and recording are going live. So if you'd like, you may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Good afternoon, councillors, members of the SLT, and the viewing public. We apologize for starting this meeting some 15 minutes late. We had a previous meeting to discuss development charges, and that meeting ran a little late. We're ready to go with this, the regular council meeting for Monday, February 7th. I see we have quorum, so I call this meeting in session. And now I would like to call on Councillor Kaur to read the land recognition statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather. This is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabemowin people, many who continue to live and work here today. These territories are covered by the Upper Canada Treaty and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resource and friendship of these great and proud people.
Thank you, Councillor Kaur. Next is the adoption of agenda. I turn to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Olson, that the agenda be amended to move item 10.2.5, Water and Wastewater 2022 Budget Update Report, after item 4.1.3, Water and Wastewater 2022 Budget Presentation. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Any discussion on this? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the agenda for the February 7th, 2022 regular meeting of council be adopted as amended. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Any comment on the agenda as amended? See none, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. To you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to the disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Thank you. After viewing the agenda, is there any councillor that would like to declare pecuniary interest? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please note that.
Thank you. I have so noted.
And before we go any further, I do have a little note for the, of course, my phone has to act up, a public shout out to our firefighters. On Saturday, the Pelham Fire Department deployed 3 trucks with 12 firefighters to clear snow from fire hydrants which were buried by the snow. Crews worked from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and cleared approximately 150 hydrants. A number of hydrants were buried with excessive amounts, which Public Works cleared today with heavy equipment. And the public service part of this is the fire department encourages all residents to clear snow from around the fire hydrants located on their front lawns. If anyone has a hydrant which needs clearing and you are unable to do so, please call the fire department number. Again, thank you to the firefighters for going out there on a Saturday morning and doing their usual job of keeping the residents of the town safe. Back to you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item of business for your presentations is Chief Limburner for a COVID-19 pandemic update.
Thank you. Chief, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the kind words to the fire group. Through Mr. Mayor, members of council, SLT, and the viewing audience, just a few numbers here in regards to COVID. And just keep in mind that these numbers aren't as accurate as they once were due to the lack of testing and the lack of contact tracing. So there are some very good stats here that show that we are moving towards a better place. So in Pelham today, a total case count of 1,133. Of those, 87 remain active. Across the region, we had 98 new cases today for a total of 32,322. Of those, 2,285 are active, and our fatalities are at 499. As far as Niagara region goes, demographically, the 60 to 79 and the 80 plus age group represent the lowest number of cases. Our younger crowd, 20 to 39-year-olds, represent the highest number of cases moving forward. So across the province, over 1 million cases total. Just over 1 million of those have been resolved. We have a total number of fatalities, 11,836. Hospital admissions across the province are slowly working their way down. Currently, there's 2,155 people that have been admitted. Of those in ICU, 486, and of those in ICU on ventilators at 283. Across the country, our total case counts at just over 3 million, and resolved just under 3 million. Total fatalities is 34,755. Niagara region, our reproductive rate is at 0.9. The region has stopped reporting the case doubling time. Positivity rate has been reduced to 16.2. Our variants of concern that have been detected, the Delta represents 1.8% of cases, unknown is at 40.0, and the Omicron is at 58.2. Our Niagara Public Health Unit is currently working with 25 active outbreaks. They've resolved 611. Our infection spread across is close contact represents 47%, community spread 42%, unknown 9.4%, and travel 1.6. As far as our vaccinations go, we're moving up the ladder. It's keep getting beating the drum about getting the shot out there. Niagara, 4.1% of our population has got one dose, 82.8% second dose, and that represents the 5 and up category. Province-wide, 5% first dose, 84 second dose, and countrywide at 4.99% first dose and 81.3% second dose. Our provincial indicators have improved slightly. New case daily average and new cases weekly average have moved into the green. The others remain in red. And that's the end of my report. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Chief, for a detailed report. As you have stated, the numbers are definitely moving in the right direction. Great to see that the region and the province and the country are all over 80% vaccinated. Excellent. Anyone on council? And I see Councillor Olson has his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the chief or the CAO. I think we can begin to see that the end is going to arrive here soon, I think, probably. Well, I'm not even going to speculate. I'm not going to ask you to either, but what is going to be the mechanism for those businesses that have made adjustments to their operations, and we permitted, say, things like outdoor dining and things like that? Is it when the state of emergency ends, does that right to do those things end, or is there a definitive date of any kind there?
Perhaps I'll go to the CAO on this.
It's hard to give you an exact answer. Partially, we don't know. Partially, those are a number of those things are beyond the Pelham's control. But with respect to patios, for instance, I'm quite certain we'll bring you another report in 2.5 to 3 months when we have some better idea and guidance to give council some options. One of which, of course, will be going back to the circumstances pre-COVID, Others might be to extend what we've been doing over the last couple of years, et cetera. We'll let those, I don't want to prejudge that because that'll have to be determined by the health information of 2.5 to 3 months from now. But other than to say that both economic development staff at the region and your staff here at the town are certainly watching, looking, and reading everything they can. And so we do mean to bring some report to you. There will be some decision points for council, but for most of these things, they're simply not in the jurisdiction of a local municipality to make those decisions.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions on the chief's report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from B. Limburner, Fire Chief and Community Emergency Management Coordinator for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any further discussion?
Any further discussion on the report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. That brings you to your next presentation, which is our CAO, Mr. David Cribbs, and it's with respect to a COVID-19 pandemic update.
Thank you. And Mr. CAO, you have the floor.
Very good. Thank you, Your Worship. Just the one item this evening, Council, which is to say that at this point in time, Town Hall is open by appointment only, and barring any significant change, we anticipate opening next Monday. So at present, we are one of 5 municipalities in Niagara open by appointment only. 4 are fully open and the rest are fully closed. So we'll move from the sort of medium category to the fully open category come Monday, barring anything dramatic happening between now and next Monday. So with that, now that said, members of the public will have to be fully vaccinated, and there is some still the questions and requirements for entry, but nevertheless, we will be fully open for business.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Mr. CAO. Any questions or comments on the CAO's report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from D. Cribbs, Chief Administrative Officer for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any other comment?
Again, any comments? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to our next presentation, and this is a presentation being presented by Ms. Teresa Quinlan Murphy with respect to the Water and Wastewater 2022 budget update.
Okay, thank you. Madam Treasurer, you have the floor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'm just getting set up here. And do you see a full screen or do you see the split screen, Holly?
Well, we can see a bit of a split screen where we can see the first page and then the second page of your report.
Yeah, don't like that one. Okay, just a second. Slideshow. And that one. Okay, is this okay? You see this one now?
Yes.
Okay, so that one's fine. It's the full one.
Yep, looks
Yes.
good.
All right, let me just get this over here. And so if I do, okay, I see what's happening. If I do that, let me just go back. Just a minute. Oh, never dull. Okay. Why is it doing that? Stop sharing. Let's try this again. There, is that better?
Nope, we don't see anything now.
Oh, okay, well, that's not good. All right, let's try this again here. All right.
If you like, the clerk's department could pull up the presentation and share the screen if you like.
Can you see it now?
Yes, yes, we can.
Yep, that's good.
Okay, sorry about that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm here tonight to provide an update of the water and wastewater budget. As you recall, we presented to council in December, and we've had councillors and council ask us to go back and see if we can review the rates that were recommended. The rates that were recommended were the rates from the BMA study, which was 7.5% for water and 9.5% for wastewater. So, right. Oh, I'm having a little bit of problem turning this thing here. Okay. Okay, so can you see the background study?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So just a little bit of a background. In 2018, the town of Pelham hired BMA management consultant to prepare a water and wastewater financial plan. And this is to meet the requirements that are set out in the financial plans regulation, OREG 453-07. So this regulation requires the financial plan to consider impacts for a minimum of 6-year period commencing the year which the existing municipal drinking water license expires, and the update prepared in 2018 covered the forecast period of 2019 to 2021. So that's the report that we're currently using when we set our rates. Page 6 of this plan states that it is well recognized that a financial plan is a dynamic document that should be updated and reevaluated on an ongoing basis to amend the assumptions, projections, and strategies, continue building awareness, assist the town in determining the extent of its financial challenges, reconfirm key financial goals and strategies, and spur the development of actions in future business plans. To date, each budget year, the town has followed the recommended rate increases as outlined in the plan. A review was done by staff to compare the actual results from 2019 to 2022 with the plan, and also to review the impact of the lower rate increase for water and wastewater than what was presented in the plan. And in our review, what we have found is that the plan is fairly accurate to what has happened in the town. The only differences that we have noted is that some of the capital projects that were originally in the BMA study are still in our capital 10-year plan, but they've been deferred, so they're not in the exact same years that we had thought that they were going to happen. But overall, we are following the plan, which is good. This is billable versus treated purchase volume. So this is just a slide that shows between the water and wastewater, what we purchase from the region, that's the purchase volumes, and what the billable volumes is what we actually bill out to the residents. And as you can see, about 81% of what's been purchased is actually what we bill, and then 19% the town absorbs that amount. And for the wastewater, that's been consistent the last 3 years, that 85% of what the wastewater that is treated is billable. This slide here is a little bit different than the one that went in December because we're actually able to provide some preliminary actual results. So when we prepare the budget in the fall, it's too early for us to provide those numbers. So this is just the preliminary numbers. They're not actual because we're still working on the year end. But you can see one of the things that we want to note is that we actually had a budget of about $641,000 for the reserves that was approved in 2021, and what we're projecting right now is about $511,000. There's been some additional expenses in there, so it decreases the amount that goes to the reserve. How this budget works is that the revenue less the expenses, the difference is the number that goes to the reserves. It always balances out to zero. The orange column is the original budget that went to council. We have made a couple adjustments. One is we received the final numbers from the region with regards to the volumetric cost of the water. It's about a $64,000 increase. And also we had to adjust the volumetric water consumption rate. The initial projection was a bit high, and that impacted the reserves. But what this shows here is the 7.5% increase, 6.5% increase, and 5.5% increase. So what this means for the water budget is that the reserves will be at 533,000 at a 7.5% increase, 495,000 at a 6.5% increase, and 469,000 at a 5.5% increase. So what does this mean for the rates for the residents? So based on an average household, which is 33 cubic meters, the increase, if we have a 7.5% rate increase, it would mean that an increase per billing is $6.49. There are 6 billings in a year. So the total increase for the year is $38.97. For a 6.5% increase to the rate, the annual increase is $33.04, and for a 5.5% increase, the annual increase is $30.66. So between the $38 and the $30.66, it's about an $8 difference if we decrease the rate from 7.5 to 5.5 for water. And what's the impact on the reserves? So this was the original reserve projection that we had, and that was based on the higher number to the reserves. This shows in the revised one the decrease to the closing reserves for December 31st, 2021. And as you can see, between 7.5, 6.5, 5.5, in the year 2026, the reserve goes into a deficit. If you look at the BMA report, it does say that debt would have to be taken out to address the capital needs. And so if we continue with the projections here, we would have to take out debt in 2026 for any of the water projects. And right now, we haven't had to take out any debt, and the original plan had us taking out debt before 2024. So we've actually done a lot better not having to take out any debt before 2026. And wastewater, this is the wastewater, the same thing. We're able to include the preliminary results for 2021 in this updated schedule. And you can see that the approved budget had a reserve of 741,000, and it's coming in at 852,000. So the wastewater reserve is doing better. For a 9.5% increase, nothing has changed from the presentation to council. So the reserve is about 888,000. If you decrease the rate to 8.5%, the reserve is 863,000. If we decrease the rate to 7.5%, the reserve is 836,000. So what does that mean to the residents and the rate? So once again, based on 33 cubic meters at 9.5%, it's $7.15 more per billing, times 6 billings is $42.88. If we increase the rate, if the rate is increased 8.5%, it's $40.48 for the whole year. And if it's at 7.5%, it's $37.90. So that's the difference between the $42.88 at 9.5% and the $37.90 at 7.5%. So what's the impact to the reserves? Well, the wastewater reserves are quite healthy. We see in 23 and 24 that it does dip into a deficit, but then it recovers again. So saying that, as you could see from the report that that I provided to council, is that we are recommending that we can decrease the wastewater rate to 7.5% and not impact the reserves too much. So in summary, this is a summary sheet here. If you look at the water, so if we decrease from 7.5% to 6.5%, the decrease to the 2022 reserve balance is about 38,000. The 10-year decrease to the reserve balance is 424,000, and the annual savings to a resident, it's only $5.94. If you go from 7.5 to 5.5, then the decrease to reserves in year is 64,000, over 10 years is 708,000, and only $8.31 an annual savings to the residents. And this is why we recommend that, you know, because of the situation of the reserves, they need all the money, the reserves needs all the money it can get, that we recommend that we stay at the 7.5% for the water. The wastewater is a different situation. The wastewater, if we decrease it from 9.5% to 8.5%, it's about a $25,000 impact in 2022, and over 10 years, $317,000 and $2.40 for a resident for the year. And if it goes from 9.5% to 7.5%, it's almost $52,000 for the in-year 2022 budget and $644,000 over a 10-year period. But looking at the positive numbers in the wastewater reserve, it can handle the reduction, and the impact is only $4.98. So that's the recommendation from staff is the water to stay at 7.5 and the wastewater can decrease to 7.5 with a total net increase of 7.5. The initial recommendation had an average increase of 8.5. So in total, the average increase between the water and wastewater, with the rate being 7.5, is $76.87 for the year. It's about $6.40 a month. So with that, I am open to any questions.
Okay, thank you, Madam Treasurer, for a thorough report. I will now ask if there is any councillors, and I see Councillor Wink.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. On slide number 3, it shows water loss, and in 2019 it was 1%, and it's gone up to 21% in 2021 and proposed for 2022 down to 19%. But there's still an 18% variable between 2019 and 2022. Can you please explain why our water loss has gone up 18%?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, what happened in can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So what happened in 2019, and actually it happened in 2018 as well, we were actually, and the region was aware of this, that their billing, how they were calculating the billing wasn't accurate. They were too low. They weren't billing us enough, and they were aware of this, and they finally solved that problem. In the past, it's always been roughly, between 85. Like these numbers here are the norm. This was not normal, because at one point we actually were what it looked like making water. We actually were billing more than what we were being charged, but that's because of the numbers weren't accurate from the region, and they fixed the problem that they had. So 2018 and 2019 had that issue. So this here is not correct. The regional readings were not correct. So we actually saved money in that year.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. Just one other quick question. What is the region charging us? How much of an increase is the region charging us for water and wastewater in 2022? So,
yes, so for you, Mr. Mayor, they're charging a 5.15% increase.
Okay, so our increase is not that far out of line from what is being increased, what's being passed on to us.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director of Public Works. I mentioned this some months ago about the amount of loss, and there were some suggestions that it could be improved, and you were working on things. But it seems to me that, like on these charts, this is the leverage number. The greatest impact for effort would come from this. I'm just wondering if you could remind me what you were doing to reduce the water loss. And I think it was said to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 15% would be an acceptable number, I think.
Go ahead, Director of Public Works.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I do have Ryan Cook on the call as well. You may want to provide some input, but even at 20% loss, that's a fairly modest amount of loss for a municipality. things that make up loss would be water main breaks, leaking services, just
Testing the fire
deficiencies.
hydrants.
Deficiencies in the system, flushing the lines that for water quality, stuff like that. That's not billable volume. So that all gets accumulated into a water loss calculation. With respect to things that can be done to prevent that, obviously there's leak detection programs that can be implemented to try to tighten up your system. Brian, if you want to speak to any other initiatives that could be completed.
Mr. Cook?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Our operations department kind of looks at water loss in a little different way than corporate services. We tend to add in the so water loss is a little more complicated than just like water in, water out through billing. So we do have an awful lot of non-revenue water use. That is flushing, construction activities. When we're commissioning new water mains, there was quite a few of those done in 2021. And then, flushing activities, water breaks, and all the operational work that we do. So we try to keep track of that as much as possible. So our number, the way we look at water loss, is a little less because we calculate in the non-revenue water, the operational use. So metering is a thing too. The older the meters get, they tend to under-register. Our meters are probably average age about 10 years now. They're about 5% inaccurate when you put them in. The older they're in the system, they do tend to they under-register, and you do end up with a little bit of that as well. So there's always an acceptable background loss within your system. There's seeps and weeps and a little bit of leakage that just occurs no matter how tight your system is. It's always there. So I think we're in decent shape. Water report is coming up in the end of the month. So our operational uses and our loss numbers are in that. And I think for the age of our system and the age of our water meters right now, we're actually not that bad.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, and thank Public Works for the explanations. Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Quinlan. The impact on the water reserves, you have that stretched out to 2031. So, for example, the 5.5%, is that the amount that you have for each year to 2031?
Ms. Quinlan? Murphy?
Charlotte's jumping. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The calculation was done because the way the reserve forecast is calculated, it's a cumulative increase. So that's why when you look at the total over the years, if you divided it by 10, you wouldn't get the number that it is for 1 year, because we tend to think of it in terms of what will be the increase each year over year. And so when we reduce it in 1 year, the following year it's assumed, say it was a 7.5% increase, it's only 7.5% over that lower amount. It's not what it would have been plus another 7.5%. Does that answer?
No, I'm not quite understanding.
Okay, so let's say, for example, we said we were going to reduce it by $10,000. It wouldn't be 10,000 times 10 years, $100,000, because we're assuming it will increase by a certain percentage each year, and then over that percentage over the year before. So it's going on a curve. So it's calculating like the area under that curve as opposed to just a straight line.
Okay, thank you. But my concern is, like, for example, at the 5.5% and having that, stretched out over that many years, the budget is set annually. So basically what we were asking to have it low at 5.5% for this year is because of the situation that we're in with the pandemic, and with it being the year of the garden, we were, the intent was to make it as painless as possible. And then next year, when the new council strikes the budget, if we're in better shape, then a higher percentage rate would be more acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussions, questions? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk, we have to have a decision here, I believe.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, right now, just under contemplation is this presentation. So right now, we do have a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that Council receive the Water and Wastewater 2022 budget update presentation from Ms. Teresa Quinlan Murphy for information. So right now, we're just on the presentation.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, any other comments or questions on the presentation? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. And to receive the presentation for information, the first vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to the staff report as the agenda was amended. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2022-0034 Water and Wastewater 2022 Budget Update Report for information, and that Council approve the water rate for 2022 at 7.5% increase, which equates to a 38.97 annual increase per 33 meters thirds average household, and that Council approve the wastewater rate for 2022 at 7.5%, which equates to a 37.90 annual increase per average household, and that staff be directed to update the water and wastewater capital reserve forecasts to reflect the update budget. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
And I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, I didn't quite get the percentage on the wastewater. What was that?
Thank you. The wastewater recommendation is 7.5%, and the water rate for 2022 is also 7.5%.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Comments or questions on this? Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Just being on the Audit and Finance Committee, we have to be mindful of our reserves and our reserve positions. We are improving, but we are grossly underfunded in most of our reserves, and anything to take a further hit to the reserves is not being necessarily prudent. The other thing I'd like to point out is our water, wastewater rates are close to the lowest in the entire region. And while that sounds great, it's, we do have opportunity that we can increase without affecting people significantly, and while also boosting our reserves. So thank you for the report, and I will be supporting the 7.5 on both water and wastewater.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? I go back to Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So is there a motion on the floor to increase both to 7.5 at this time?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the staff recommendation is on the floor, and right now it would be that the water and wastewater be at 7.5%.
Thank you. I would like to propose an amendment to leave the wastewater at 7.5 and decrease the water to 5.5.
Do you have a seconder, Councillor Stewart?
And we need a seconder, and I see Councillor Hahn will second.
Thank you. So there is a motion on the floor to amend the main motion to leave the wastewater at the 7.5%, but to move the water rate to 5.5%. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillors, any discussions on this amendment to the motion? I don't see any. Councillor Stewart, it was your amendment. Would you like to speak to it one more time, or?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what I said, in light of the fact that we are in a pandemic and we have people that are struggling to pay the bills. We just passed a plan so that people that are struggling can, defer their tax payments. So I think it's appropriate that we keep this as low as possible just this one time, and that it's also the year of the garden where people will likely be using more water for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hahn, you seconded the motion. Any comments?
Yes, through the mayor, I can reiterate what I brought up, I guess it was a couple meetings ago, and it was exactly what Councillor Stewart just mentioned, and that is that, yes, the year of the garden, yes, we're still very much in a pandemic and have been, shouldn't be penalizing people that have had to stay home, no fault of their own, therefore using more water and of course wastewater. Also too, when looking at the chart, it looks as though the red happens well after 26. So again, the next council can certainly, hopefully will be not in a pandemic situation and can make adjustments as necessary as they move forward. But certainly the chart takes us well into 2031. So that's a long ways out. And I think until 2024, we're still looking okay. So in my mind, this is the way to go. And additionally, 2018, when this report was actually done, we weren't in a COVID situation. So none of this could have been, forecasted at that point in time, understandably so. But I think that we're in a position now that if we can make the adjustment to the water down to 5.5 instead of 7.5, that's what I would support.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Madam Clerk?
Thank you. So this is for the amendment, and the vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
No.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The amendment is defeated, and therefore you're brought back to the main motion.
For discussion?
Yeah, the main
Yeah.
motion is back on the floor for further discussion.
Yes, okay, great. So, Council, just to remind everyone, we're back at 7.5 and 7.5. Any other discussions on this motion as it stands? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as the motion stands, this vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
No.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. To you, Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is the adoption of minutes. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. 1, Special Council 01/2022, Special Council Meeting January 17th, 2022. And 2, Regular Council 02/2022, Regular Council January 24th, 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion and to call for any errors or omissions.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. After looking at these minutes, is there any omissions or additions that any councillor would like to bring forward? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Oh, wait.
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh, go ahead, Councillor Kaur.
I'm sorry. Is it? No, I'm sorry. I've been wrong. I apologize.
Okay, no problem, Councillor. I'll again ask question 1 again. Any omissions or additions to the minutes? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This begins with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes?
Counselor Stewart,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, this does bring us to item 7 of the agenda, and this is where a counselor can lift an item for separate consideration. A counselor does not require to lift any items if they just wish to speak to the matter. Mr. Mayor, are there any counselors who wish to lift any items?
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any items that any counselor would like to lift? Not.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Councilor Court?
Yes, 8.51 and 8.52.
Okay, thank you. Any other items that any counselors would like to lift? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would just point out that item 8.1 includes a recommendation from COW, the final paragraph, which deals with the water and wastewater rates, which council has just determined. Councilor may wish to lift that for separate consideration to dispose of separately, opposed to approving it.
Would any counselor like to lift that, please? We need it lifted, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the staff report for the water and wastewater, if I can just go back to that. If I am so correct, the staff report, which indicated the 7.5% for the water and wastewater, Councillor Hildebrandt, Councillor Kaur, Councillor Olson, and Councillor Wink and the mayor voted in the positive, carrying that. So therefore, it did carry, meaning council has determined the water and wastewater rate would be 7.5 for the water and wastewater. Unless I've otherwise recorded incorrectly. If that's the case, and this has such carried, 8.1, which is the recommendation arising from December 14th, Special Committee of the Whole. That recommendation that is on your report is to approve the water and wastewater rates as originally recommended by staff, which was a 7.5% for water and a 9.5% for the wastewater, but council's now determined each are 7.5.
So we now have to lift that and defer it.
I would recommend that council lift it because you can't approve both. They would contravene each other. So my recommendation to council would be to lift 8.1 and then perhaps postpone indefinitely.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Hildebrandt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will lift that item.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
It's just so noting. Thank you, I thank you. So I have Councillor Kaur having lifted 8.5.1 and 8.5.2, and Councillor Hildebrandt has lifted 8.1. All other items will remain on the consent agenda. To you, Mr. Mayor, to consider. Council can just discuss any other items that are left if they so choose with respect to staff reports or correspondence.
If I may, Madam Clerk, I would like to make a comment on 8.5.4.2, and that is the Niagara Region's official plan. I'd just like to say that we have done the region, and of course the councillors have also had their say, that it's a plan that is well on its way to completion, but at the same time, in spite of all the work we've done and the way that both councils have tried to foresee what's going to be in the future, and this actually goes to quite a ways out. There is a paragraph that I believe should be read, and that is the Niagara official plan will be monitored for what it is, or for what is and isn't working. The region seeks to be flexible and adapt to changes when necessary. Policies will be reviewed at regular intervals to ensure regional and local interests are aligned and that growth planning is monitored to determine if changes should be advanced. So it's nice to see, and it should be pointed out that this is what I call a living document. It's very fluid, and even though it will come into being hopefully July of this year, it can and will be reviewed whenever council decides that it should be changed or looked at. So I like to think, point that out, that this is a changeable living document. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If there's no other comments on any of the other items for the consent agenda, does council have any other comments, or do they wish I call the vote on this item?
I see Councillor Olson. Councillor Olson?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. 8.2.1 is the LDD moth presentation, and I was wondering if I could ask Mr. Maher about the spray program and whether or not there's an opportunity to expand that the coverage into other areas. I'm specifically thinking of South Pelham and Short Hills and that type of an area.
Director of Public Works, Jason Maher, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I will ask Ryan to speak on this a little bit more in depth with respect to the areas that we're going to be looking at spraying as part of the 2022 program. In general terms, the process, where we're at right now in the process is our consultant has completed the infestation survey, and that's completed over the late fall into the early winter when the leaves fall and they're able to get out and have a good look at the egg masses that are on the trees. And it's a systematic approach where they look at not every tree in the town, but they take sample representations, and that's a lot of it's based on comments and feedback that we're receiving from residents and the public as well. But they do a complete survey of the town, and then they will determine what the level of infestation is throughout the town. The areas that they've identified in their report concentrate more on the rural areas, that being south of Fenwick, north of Fawn Hill, and in the wooded areas between the two municipalities, the Fawn Hill and the Fenwick. So that's the process now is that given the budget that's been approved as part of the operating budget, $150,000, less the administration costs for carrying out the program, staff will develop a spray program in consultation with our consultant, the manager of public works, and also the applicator. And we'll come back with spray blocks that will fit within that $150,000 envelope and that approved budget. With respect to the costing for increasing the spray program, the actual cost for the spraying is about $1,000, a little less than that per hectare. So when we look at extending the program, obviously that it based on the area that you want to have sprayed, it impacts the budget. Ryan does know a little bit more with respect to pricing and what it would cost to do certain areas of the town. I believe at one point we looked at extending the program to the full town, which was economically not feasible. At this time, I think I'll turn it over to Ryan for some comments.
Okay. Mr. Cook?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So our spray program this year is essentially going to be around 104 hectares. And like the Director of Public Works did state, we're going to be looking for areas kind of just outside the urban boundary. We've pretty much taken care of the moth within the urban boundary, aside from I think I have a couple specimen trees. We're going to try some tree injection instead of an aerial spray just outside of Spruce Side. It's in the Steep Bower Trail. So yeah, we are going to be concentrated on just outside the urban boundary, trying to keep the moth from reinfecting inside. So expanding too far outside of that, I mean, I'm essentially spraying under 1% of the entire square area of the town of Pelham. So there are 99% of the places I'm not going to be able to spray this year. And those, we really have been successful in targeting spraying, and just really looking at the worst of the areas and where we're going to do the most impact. Areas that we will spray, like I'm not spraying a lot of, we probably won't end up, sorry, I shouldn't say we won't, but a lot of properties where they're large woodlots, we spray along the road allowance and maybe enough to cover the area where their homes are. So you can actually go outside and enjoy a little bit of your property, but trees in the back 40 or of someone's woodlot, these trees are a lot more resilient to defoliation from the moth. So, and they're really not impacting on someone's enjoyment of their property within the boundaries of where their dwelling is and yard. So these are the areas that we kind of concentrate in, and we go back and forth with the consultant and the air applicator until we really target the most we can do for that amount of money, where we're honestly going to do the most impact on people's enjoyment. But that's kind of where we're at. This actually goes against what the consultant said this year. They thought that it's probably time to pull out and then allow people in rural woodlots and larger properties to take care of themselves if they do so choose, and we concentrate back on a couple of trees in the urban area. So we do have the money available, so we would like to spray a little bit more just to strengthen the kind of perimeter around the urban areas, but that's kind of what we're going to try to do.
Councillor Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just a comment on the area, I'm glad to see that we are thinking of going south of Fenwick. I know the last 2 summers, they have had great infestations, and due to monetary restraints, we couldn't get out to that part of the town. So I know they will be very appreciative if we can stretch the boundary a little bit and do that area. And of course, it is nice to see that they obviously they recommended, what they're recommending obviously means that the egg counts must be down, and the spray programs we have been doing have been successful to the point where we're only going to have moderate infestations. So that's great to hear. Excellent. And who knows, maybe the cold weather is also going to decrease numbers. Jason, Director Marr.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that's correct. And a lot of what you said there, and I'd like to take the opportunity as well now to let the public know that there are private companies that are undertaking spray programs, and they are putting together those programs now as we speak. So I think the information is available on our website, which identifies links to contractors that are undertaking their own spray programs outside of what the town is completing. So that's another resource that people could use as well to try to protect their properties.
Great, thank you for that information. Any other councillor have any other items they wish to lift? Not, I see Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to I guess the CAO 8.3.2 for the hoop houses. Reading through that, is the report suggesting that that we review the official plan and or have, I read through, it says we get REITMA consultants to do it, or we put it into our official plan. I guess we probably start preparing for it, but that'll be for next year. Is that correct?
Mr. CAO?
It is correct that council has approved town staff to start working on the official plan before the end of this term of council, and we will be turning our mind to that after we finish the updates to the zoning bylaw. So that will be that's the condition precedent for us to begin that next very large task. That will be I think the best case scenario is that's about an 18-month task, and it can quite easily be longer. I've personally been involved with 2 updates that took 5 years each. So that being said, we anticipate getting to that work later this calendar year. The other thing is we are waiting, and we're obligated to wait for the region. The region's formally requested that no municipality work at doing a major upgrade to its or revisions to its official plan until they finish their process, because ours by law have to give consideration to the ones above, or in this case to the region's OP. And that process is still incomplete. His worship might be able to give you a better update on that process than can I. So to answer your question, hopefully, this report does suggest that if it's the will of council to yet again take a look at the hoop house issue, that it should be done as part of that process, where we're required to look at every aspect of the town's official plan, and hoop houses are one component of that. So this is work you have assigned to us, and we will be commencing. And that process has will have multiple public meetings, multiple public input and touch points, and multiple points in time for council to touch it as well. So there'll be a considerable consultation and input opportunities. And certainly it's our position that the current official plan is quite appropriate in how it addresses hoop houses. This is the third report we've written on this issue, but in the event council disagrees with that staff assessment, the appropriate way is to do it as part of the official plan draft, revision process, and keeping in mind that this council and the previous council haven't gone through that exercise, so it's now certainly becoming due. It's just that we can't start until the region finishes its part. And I think that's formally our position.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And of course, the region is hoping, actually is mandated to have their official plan done in July of this year. That's when we hope to be done. Any other questions or items to lift? Not seeing any. I will lift one more myself then, and that's the 8.3.3, the communication policy. Mr. CAO, I imagine you had the majority of work done on this, if not all of it. I wondered if this communication policy is something that you have seen in place in your previous areas of employment, and therefore it's not necessarily a Pelham policy as such, but a generic policy that applies to Pelham. Comments, sir?
Well, firstly, I should note that Leah Letford is present in the meeting, and this certainly Ms. Letford did a lot of the work on this policy as currently drafted. Also, I should note that this is substantially a modernization or an update to a policy that the town already previously had. There is some tightened and strengthened language within it, and if you go through the report, I think those portions are highlighted for you.
Yep.
But to directly address your question, sir, I think any municipality worth its salt has some sort of equivalent policy document. Furthermore, I would submit to you that the law has changed dramatically on a number of the points where we've updated this document in the last 18 months, maybe 2 years, although I don't feel it's been even that long. And it was starting to change, I would say, even 3 years ago. Council may, on an individual level, be able to recall various instances of employees, not specifically in the municipal context, but behaving badly on social media and being terminated for doing things on live television, either at sporting events or in large crowds. And the law has evolved fairly dramatically to suggest that one's personal conduct, depending on the context, can have a major impact upon the employer. So we have tried to incorporate the body of case law that's now present into this document, and so as to be clear in our standards for ourselves and the levels to which we hold ourselves, so that we can continue providing the best service possible to area residents. With that being said, certainly Ms. Letford's present, and if she has anything to add, I'd certainly like to yield the floor to her, if I may.
Okay. Ms. Ledford, any comments to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. The communication policy that the town of Pelham had in place already was very fulsome to the type of material and supplies that were being used at the time it was done. As we continue to see more of our residents engaging with the town through social media, it was really an opportunity for us to take a chance to update this and be current with other policies that are active in the community. And if there are any other questions, happy to address.
Okay, thank you. As you both have stated, a lot of changes since 2015, that's for sure. Any other questions for either the CAO or our communications specialist? Okay, not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion on the floor put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the February 7th, 2022 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved, save and accept item 8.1, 8.5.1, and 8.5.2. To you, Mr. Mayor, for further discussion, or shall I call the vote?
I think you can call, oh, I see Councillor Olson has his hand up. Go ahead, Councillor.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, 8.3.4, the grants update. I just wanted to make a comment about a couple of things here, one to the CAO and to his staff. Their employee donation to Passstone, because as I understand it, that service there is almost overwhelmed with the number of people that are using the service. So I want to say something about appreciating the donation of staff to that important need in our community. Secondly, I also want to point out the number and success of the number of grants that we received. And we were at the park the other day and saw that the pickleball was approved. This is going to transform Centennial Park and make it into a very busy place. So I want to mention those things as a way of recognizing and appreciate the efforts of staff once again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments? I turn to the clerk.
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your items to be considered under separate consideration. The first item is item 8.1, and this is with respect to the balance of the recommendation sheet from December 14, 2021. And that recommendation sheet was dealing with the water and wastewater rate. And therefore, it was lifted, as I understand from Councillor Hildebrandt, to be able to dispose of it separately, as council has already determined what the rates would be.
Okay, and Councillor Hildebrandt, comments on this?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation report that's provided in 8.1 was 7.5% for water and 9.5% for wastewater. We now, as a council, have approved 7.5 and 7.5. And that's why we're removing this from the recommendation report.
Excellent. And I believe, Madam Clerk, you would like to see us defer it?
So the motion to be put forth would be it resolved that consideration of this matter be postponed indefinitely.
Okay.
And I would be looking for a seconder, as I have Councillor Hildebrandt as the mover.
Okay, I see. Councillor Hildebrandt, will you motion be a firster? And Councillor Wink, you're a seconder? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. To you, Mr. Mayor, if there's any discussion.
Any further discussion on this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next item, on the agenda. Both items were lifted by Councillor Kaur, and this is with respect to, there's two Integrity Commissioner reports, report number IC 15479-1021 and IC 15480-1021. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Corey, you lifted these items. Your comments, please.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO. I just wondered if I could group these together, or do I have to ask the same questions twice?
Mr. CEO?
I'm quite happy to take the questions together, sir.
Yeah, so do we have a final building on both of those?
We do not.
Okay, so we don't, I put a motion that we defer this until we get a final detailed report on how much these two items cost us.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just writing this down. Councillor Kaur wishes to bring a motion to defer until a final, when you say report, sir, do you mean bill, an invoice, as it is from the Integrity Commissioner?
Yes, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk. Last time it was pieced together. We get information one week and then we get emails about it. I just want a total bill, and we should be able to determine one bill for either separate for each individual one, or just what the total cost was.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the motion put forth by Councillor Kaur is to defer until the final bill has been received by the town. Councillor Kaur would need a seconder.
Is there a seconder for this? And I see Councillor Stewart.
And I understand from Councillor Kaur that he wishes to group this motion together with both items. If council is agreeable, then I'm happy to do that.
Yes.
Yes, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO, what time frame are we looking at?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I apologize, Mr. CAO, if I may. I did have conversation with the Integrity Commissioner's office, and I understood that they indicated the bill would likely come sometime mid-February, so I would expect to receive it perhaps in the coming week.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
Any other discussion on the motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. And so this is a motion to defer, and it's for both items, 8.5.1 and 8.5.2. And the vote for this begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
Mr. Mayor, that does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next item of business, which is a council report from Councillor Olson. And this is with respect to the Ontario government's plan to bring high-speed internet access to all communities in Ontario by 2025. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, discussion on this item. Councillor Wink, is that your hand I see or not? No. Okay.
Well, yeah, I do have some comments and some questions. I apologize for the clock in the background. So anyway, it's great that SWIFT is moving forward and certain areas in Pelham has been identified. We have residents who live just outside the urban area of Fonthill who require high-speed internet but are not identified in the SWIFT project and can't get high-speed internet from Bell or Cogeco, where services are provided 300 meters up the road in the urban area. Is there anything that we can do as a town to assist these residents? I'll open it to Mr. Cribbs or
yeah. We'll start with Mr. Cribbs. Any comments or suggestions from the CAO?
Well, unfortunately, the underlying premise and model of SWIFT is to finance the what I would describe as the marginal business cases where you know there's demand, but if there was a self-evident strong market, would already be served, as the downtown cores are of any population center. And so what the applicants for SWIFT do is try to aggregate as many sort of moderate business cases together as they can to make the best business case for the funding. And really, as SWIFT continues, it they're picking off the lowest hanging fruit, and then they pick off the next lowest hanging fruit, and eventually the business cases will probably be truly abysmal. But this sounds like one of those, relatively speaking, low-hanging fruit pieces. So we have to hope that our corporate applicants locally are applying to serve them. And I suppose to the extent that we become aware of specific requests or demands for service, we could hand those around along to the local service providers. But in a fundamental way, we have no influence over the larger process. Niagara Region has some input. It has made a financial contribution, but we don't at the local level. And where there are two tiers, it's been the upper tier that's been doing it.
Councillor?
Yeah, so are you suggesting that we would be able to contact Bell or Cogeco and act on behalf of the residents?
Well, most of the funding is not going to the Bells and Cogecos. It's going to much smaller local providers. So, for instance, the two in the area I'm familiar with are neither of those, for instance. Really, it's just about highlighting the opportunity and then in turn hoping that one of these service providers wants to make a business case around it's the last mile, right? That half block or that 3/4 of a block with 3 farms on it, or 3 rural addresses, and 3 rural addresses not being good enough for a business case, but if it's subsidized, all of a sudden maybe it would be. So I think, I'm sorry, I realize this is not a very inspiring answer, but I think the most help we can do is connect demand to requests for service to those who are in the business of providing service, and hope that they feel there's enough there to make application for funding.
Councillor?
No, that's fine, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Wink, I've helped out a couple of residents and a couple of suggestions. One of the members of the art committee actually was able to connect with Starlink, which is a very competitive. It's a satellite service. It's Elon Musk's satellite service, and that's worldwide. I mean, my brother uses that with his business, whether he's in town in Port Louis or whether he's out west, because he just brings it with him. So that's a very competitive. Takes a while to get there because you have to put in your application. It takes some money, but it's really effective. And the other option for another local resident was they were outside, and it meant they had to spend some money on a tower. But really, the high-speed internet was available for them, and they've been using it now for over a year. Now, it did cost them several thousand for a tower, but they did get high-speed internet. And knowing them having kids in school where you all need internet, plus he works from home on the internet, it's worked out excellently. So yeah, there are areas like that, but there are some other solutions. And I know it's going to be a while to get these other people who are running the fiber cable down to those places, from what I've seen. So I don't know if that helps, but that's just a comment.
Yeah, it helps. So maybe we can take this offline and connect this resident in with our conversation. So appreciate that.
Sure. You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Olson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I submitted a presentation to the clerks, and I'd like to go through that if I can on the broadband. And I think it answers most of the questions that have been raised here. First of all, there's the opportunity that's become available to people. I'm sorry?
No, you're good.
To people. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, are you saying something?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I've submitted the benefits and the opportunity to the meeting, and I've also submitted a broadband map. There are two projects underway. One is called the Chandler Project, and the other one is called the North Pelham Project. That's with Bell, and they're offering, actually offer a map that shows exactly where the next phase of the broadband is going to be extended. And I've had many people tell me how well the SWIFT works, and the rate they're charging, which is competitive to the other users inside the urban area. And I've had two people tell me today that they got their boxes hooked up to the side of the house, and you can see them if you go down the concession roads. You can see the flags in the ditch, and they were working today at Sumler and Balfour. So this is going to happen, and I think the role of council, if somebody asks you if you're on the map, people can dial up and put their address in and see if they're going to get their service, and that is the rural broadband internet hookup or link that's on the agenda. The HTTPS number is there, and you can put your address in, and it shows you on the map when you're going to get it. It also shows the under services area. So as far as Highway 20, it was as far as Acipiter that they were going to get the service, and then it'll go down the hill and out to Highway 24, I expect. So that's the expectation I see. And I attended the meeting the other day, or the session with our MPP when they announced the funding for future, and we have a chance to ask for, make sure that the service got extended to the rest of the community. So that's what I had to say, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you for that report, Councilor Olson. Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that Council receive the presentation from Councillor Olson with respect to the Ontario government's plan to bring high-speed internet access to all communities in Ontario by 2025 for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, if there's any other discussion?
Okay, and I guess I neglected to ask any councillors if they had any questions on Councillor Olson's report. I'll do that now, and I don't see any. Any else on the motion? And not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your staff reports on the agenda, and we have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0036 LED Streetlight Conversion Binding Letter of Engagement between the Town of Pelham and Real Term Energy Corporation for information, and that Council approve the award to Real Term Energy Corporation to complete the replacement and upgrade of the Town of Pelham's existing streetlight system to LED luminaires, and at an estimated contract price of $621,810 plus HST, and that Council authorize and direct the Mayor and Clerk to execute the binding letter of engagement, design, upgrade, and transfer agreement between the Town of Pelham and Real Term Corporation, Inc. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on this motion/report on LED streetlights conversions? Councillor Hildebrandt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment. Our present repair provider has done many LED light conversion programs with Real Term, and they highly recommend Real Term. So I'll be supporting this motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really pleased to see this moving forward. You know, it will pay for itself, and as the lights are installed, it will start having an impact right from the very beginning. It's not something where it all has to be changed before we get a positive impact. But as we go along, it will start paying for itself. I think it's a great initiative.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing anybody. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next staff report. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0035, Quaker Road Reconstruction Cost Sharing Agreement with Niagara Region for information, and that Council approve funding in the amount of $1,976,130 for the reconstruction of Quaker Road from Pelham Street to Line Avenue, including detailed design, construction, and contract administration and inspection services, and that Council authorize and direct the Mayor and Clerk to execute the cost-sharing agreement Appendix A between the Town of Pelham and the Regional Municipality of Niagara. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. And perhaps before I turn it over to Council, I'll ask the Director of Public Works just to flesh this out just a little bit more, perhaps, as to what we're looking at here tonight. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So back on December 6th, staff brought a report to council which requested approval to proceed with an engineering assignment to do the detailed design for Quaker Road between Pelham Street and Line Avenue. The region is currently undertaking the design for the installation of a sanitary force main, or a gravity sewer, sorry, that they're installing, large sewer. And this provided an opportunity for the town to partner with the region to complete the project at the same time. Council did approve the award of the engineering assignment in the amount of $39,500. Actually approved the capital budget for that item was $50,000, but the estimate that we've got from the consultant is $39,500. The region has come back now. They've started the design process and they're working with staff. What they're looking for now is a commitment to the actual construction works itself. At this point in time, it's an estimate. The way the agreement would work is that the region would be the owner of the project. They would tender the project. They would do the contract administration and inspection for the reconstruction project. I think in my report, the overall budget for the entire project is about $6.7 million. That extends from Pelham Street all the way to Rice Road. And the town would be charged based on obviously the tender quantities and the actual tender unit prices that are submitted by the successful proponent. So at this point in time, they've estimated the full cost to do the design, the construction, all the contract administration inspection is in the order of $1.976 million based on the estimates and the preliminary design that's been completed to date. Obviously, staff would be looking for council to give the authorization to proceed with that project, and we would be reporting back to council as part of a 2023 capital budget with respect to the actual value of that project, assuming that we can get it tendered late this fall. Either way, we would have a better estimate, a more refined estimate on what the actual costs of the project are at the time of the 2023 budget presentation.
Great, thank you for that additional information. So just one question before I turn it to council. So the region doing all the engineering work, what have you, but they will send out two different tenders. So the 1.97, which is our estimated cost, would that be a tender by itself? Or is it all going to go out as one tender and they have done the preliminary work and thinking that the 1.97 is what we're going to be on the hook for? Do you know that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the idea is that the contract would be tendered as one complete project.
Okay.
They're estimating that value to be about 6.7 million. And the region and the town would have an agreement in place with respect to the actual work that the town has ownership of. And there would just be a cost sharing mechanism in place. And we would be billed by the region upon completion of the work.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from any councillors on this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, your next item is a staff report, and I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-37, Recommendation Report for Emerald Trail Draft Plan of Subdivision 1114 Hayes Street for information as it pertains to file number 26T19-01-2021, and that Council approve the draft plan of subdivision attached as Appendix A, subject to the conditions in Appendix B. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, discussion on this item? Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Public Works. One of the things I've noticed is that every subdivision we have, or every area we have, the decorative lighting that gets put in there seems to be a highlight for the building. And I know it's approved by, it says it's approved by the Director of Public Works according to number 21 under roads under this report. Is it possible we can establish a standard for these decorative lights in these subdivisions? Because that, I believe, will greatly help our maintenance contractor once we get to replacing these lights. Even if you look at the Meridian Community Center area, you can see many different types of LED lights. And I'm sure it's going to be difficult once it comes time to repair these lights or replace them. What do we do? Because even the light standards for these lights seem different. So if you can comment on that, I'd certainly appreciate that. Thank you.
Director of Public Works, Mr. Moore?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and Director of Planning may have some comments as well following mine. At the current moment, we don't have an actual standard that we force the developers to use, but the plans are reviewed and the products are reviewed by the engineering department at the time of the detailed submissions of the design. Definitely something that we can take forward and look at, especially now that we're doing a complete inventory and investment grade audit on our lighting system, existing lighting system for the LED conversion. So there is an opportunity there to look at standardization of some of those decorative lights. That's an opportunity.
Okay, and I will go to Director of Planning, Ms. Weens, for any comments she may have.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, certainly, as Director of Public Works indicated, these do get reviewed, and we certainly try to direct proponents to use something that we already have in terms of a decorative standard, so that we don't end up with 20 different lighting standards across the town. There are about 4 or 5 different lighting standards that are used in the town, and so we certainly try to get them to use one of those and not introduce another new one to us when we're doing the detailed engineering design review.
Thank you for that, Ms. Weens. Back to you, Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the Director of Planning and Public Works. Welland seems to be very progressive in this area, and they standardize a lot in their lighting in their subdivisions, and that really helps their maintenance costs. That's really where it'll come down to. It's not the cost right now that we'll be encountering, but when you have multiple costs, like at the Meridian Center is a typical example. Some of those lights are going to be huge repair costs if you can even get a light, an LED light that looks like some of those lights. It's just a general comment for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, for bringing it to Council's attention. Any other comments on this report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, and the vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Counselor Hahn,
Yes.
Counselor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Counselor Kaur,
Yes.
Counselor Olson,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Your next item is a motion put forth by Counselor Olson, seconded by Counselor Wink. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0039 Corporate Services Arch Replacement Update for information, and that Council support and approve a $30,000 bridge loan to be repaid by December 31st, 2022 to the Font Hill Rotary Club to be used for the construction of the said Pelham arches should the My Main Street grant not be received. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any comments or questions on this motion? Not seeing any. I think council, like most citizens, are anxiously awaiting the resurrection of the arches. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, and the vote begins with Counselor Wink.
Yes.
Counselor Hahn.
Yes.
Counselor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Counselor Kaur.
Yes.
Counselor Olson.
Yes.
Counselor Stewart.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, your next item on the agenda is the presentation and consideration of bylaws. And I do have a motion put forth by Counselor Hahn, seconded by Counselor Court. Be it resolved that Council for the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass same. And that the mayor and clerk be and hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. 1. Bylaw number 4421-2022, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 4352-2022, known as the Administrative Penalty Process Bylaw for non-parking related offenses. 2. Bylaw number 4422-2022, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 4107-2019 as amended by bylaw 4296-2020 and 4362-2021, being the bylaws to govern the proceedings of the Town of Pelham Council, its committees, and conduct of its members, and the calling of meetings to provide for electronic meeting participation for the Council of the Town of Pelham and the Committee of Adjustment and Advisory Committees. 3. Bylaw number 4423-2022, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into a cost-sharing agreement with the region of Niagara for the Quaker Road reconstruction project between Pelham Road and Line Avenue. Bylaw number 4424-2022, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into design, upgrade, and transfer agreement with Real Term Energy Corporation with respect to LED streetlight conversion project. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, any discussion, questions on any of these bylaws? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Counselor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Counselor Kaur.
Yes.
Counselor Olson.
Yes.
Counselor Stewart.
Yes.
Counselor Wink.
Yes.
Counselor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to motions and notices of motion. And the first motion listed on the agenda is Counselor Olson's. If Counselor Olson wishes to read into the record, he may do so.
Counselor Olson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My motion reads, and it's seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Whereas council has received deputations from area residents regarding drainage issues in the Far, River, and Weber Road area. And whereas the town of Pelham approved undertaking a drainage study for the Far, River, and Weber Road areas as part of the capital budget for 2022. And whereas council directed staff to host a community meeting with residents of the Far, River, and Weber Road areas to discuss options for them regarding addressing drainage issues in the Far, River, and Weber Road areas. And whereas council has been provided additional information from R.J. Burnside and Associates Limited regarding drainage issues on a resident's property following the approval of the 2022 capital budget. Now therefore, council requests staff to prepare a report on the town initiating a petition for a municipal drain in the Far, River, and Weber Road areas for the February 22nd, 2022 council meeting prior to preparing for terms of reference and undertaking a request for proposals for the drainage study approved in the 2022 capital budget. And that council consider the staff report on the town initiating a petition for a municipal drain in the Far River and Weber Road areas to be received on February 22nd, 2022, potentially as an alternative to undertaking the drainage study approved in the 2022 capital budget, and the need for staff to host a community meeting for with area residents to discuss options to address drainage issues.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Olson. And then we can discuss.
Certainly, please
Okay,
go ahead and
so
discuss.
Councilor Olson, you're the mover of the motion. Do any other comments?
Put on your mic, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Might help if I turn my mic on. Sorry, Councilor Olson, you are the mover of this motion. Do you have any other comments you would like to make?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Were you on mute, Mr. Mayor? Or what?
No, the microphone malfunctioned.
Oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to point out to the council that we've had the deputations, and we have a serious, well, the residents of the area have serious drainage problems, including some of our farmers in that area. And I'd like to have a study of, like to propose a study of what could be done to correct that. I believe that the Niagara region also has a role in some of the issues, and I'd like to see work done based upon an engineering study of some kind, because we're probably, you're going to have to do an engineering study. If you're going to do anything at all, you're going to have that as a basis. So this proposes that, and it also gives the option of having community meetings to hear what people in the area have to say.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Olson. And Councilor Hildebrand, you seconded the motion. Any comments?
Yes, I agree with Councilor Olson. I was at the site and I had a detailed review with the residents there. And it is a serious concern for the residents and the farmer who's involved as well. And we need to take some action. We just can't sit as a council and do nothing and just let it be the way it is. So I'm in favor. That's why I seconded this motion.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments on the report, on the motion from any other councilors? And I see Councilor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm concerned about anything to do with this moving forward at this point. I understand that the farmers are having a difficult time, but none of what has happened is the fault of the town. There's ongoing litigation surrounding that property. And until those issues are resolved, I don't believe the town should get involved in it. If this goes forward and we end up having to put in a municipal drain, that will be a burden for not just the people who live just directly, that are directly impacted by it, but municipal drain. So it would affect the water draining from anywhere into that drain. So it would be a further tax burden. And then there would be the cost of the drain and the ongoing maintenance of the drain. So that's why I'm opposed to this at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Any other comments? I see Councilor Hahn.
Yes, through the mayor. I guess my question would be is that I need to better understand how this is a town concern. So what I understand so far is, yes, there is definitely a concern, but how is it the fault of the town? It could be, or it might not be, but how do we know that it is? And so we're endeavoring to spend taxpayers' money, and yet we have no real source of information that would preclude that, this isn't in fact something that needs to be taken on from the town of Pelham. The region, which my understanding, and this is what I mentioned at a prior meeting, the region seems to perhaps be wiping their hands of this, but is Weber Road not a regional road? And does the water not ultimately flow into Welland River, which would be overseen, I think, to some degree by the NPCA? So as far as having other parties and stakeholders involved, I would think that that's something that should be looked into as from a cost perspective. And because both parties, NPCA as well as the region, have engineers, for us to shell out money for engineering studies and other studies just arbitrarily at our costs or taxpayers' costs, why are we taking that on when we don't know that this is in fact the fault of the town of Pelham? And if somebody can enlighten me, that would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you. I will point out that council had addressed this issue. I don't know if it was, February. So I believe it was just before Christmas, we had this come to us, and then we decided we were going to go further with the public meetings and what have you. The farmer, in the meantime, hired a consultant. This is this Bernstein fellow. I can assure council that this the fellow who did this report is to Drainage in Ontario, to what, I forget that financer that is to money investments. This guy is the guru of drainage in Ontario who wrote this report. And if he wrote that report, he squarely has some directions as to who's to blame, and that's only one engineer, and that is true. But it is that's the one event that has taken place since council addressed this back in December. So the motion that Councillor Olson and Councillor Hildebrand brought forward, as I see, is where you now want a staff report on their ideas on the report brought to us by Mr. Bernstein, or by the company Bernstein, and then give us options, I think, on how to proceed. Mr. CAO, am I on track? And if any other comments?
Well, staff have written a pair of reports now. Sort of both courses of action are not ones endorsed by your staff. So there is that, and we certainly hesitate to get in the middle of your difference amongst yourselves on policy. So if you wish some combination of Mr. Marr, Ms. Weens and I can sort of reiterate the staff position. That being said, this item is before you again because I feel that, you know, there are the two realities. The one is there's clearly some drainage issues in the area. The other is these are drainage issues of which the municipality has not had any control because, you know, of a court ruling, 20 years ago, and some forced development over which the town had no control. And now possibly some more recent intervening variables. So the community, there's a problem in the community, and the question is, should we use the town as a vehicle to settle that, or should that dispute be settled privately amongst, frankly, potential litigants? And that's a fundamental question to which I don't know that there's a right answer, or the right answer is the one that a majority of you will determine. So essentially, to Councillor Stewart's point, that's the one that's closest to the staff position, which is, or Councillor Hahn's point. The staff position is that there's no clear, the municipality, we're not in this situation because of any action or inaction by the municipality. It's had no control over this the way it normally would with development. The question is, notwithstanding the fact that maybe there's no legal requirement, do we step forward as a community to put some public resources into attempting to address the issues? And that comes down to one's theory of what government ought to be doing. This is a dispute that's fundamentally about water on private lands and what some residents may or may not be doing to some other residents. and their impacts on water courses. So that really comes down to why are we here? And I can coherently make the argument for you that this is a private dispute and you ought not to spend tax dollars, or I could coherently make the argument for you that we're here as a community, there's a problem, and we are a vehicle through which people can solve problems. And so with that, I mean, that's sort of the crux of the issue. From a narrow legal perspective, staff have written you a couple of reports that say not actually a municipal issue, this is a private dispute. We've said that in varying words. I'm trying to reiterate that again. But that being said, that's only a narrow response. Looking at the corporation of the town of Pelham's interest, the town of Pelham's interest is whatever a majority of you determine it to be.
Okay, thank you, Mr. CAO. Let's go to Director of Planning, Ms. Weens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, as the CAO indicated, we have did a report. We did a report in December outlining kind of what the drainage issues were, and you did hear deputations from some residents and a farmer. And certainly through that process, you directed staff to undertake a drainage study to look at the whole area and identify potential drainage options, but those wouldn't necessarily be drainage options or solutions that the municipality would undertake. They could be drainage solutions for individuals to undertake, but it would be to do a drainage study and, you know, confirm the drainage flows and where there are problems and what the potential solutions might be. And then we were to also meet with area residents. And now Councillor Olson is perhaps suggesting that in light of the new information that was received from RJ Burnside and Associates, that we should look at perhaps doing a municipal drain as an alternative, without wanting to put full words in Councillor Olson's mouth. So, you know, as the CAO indicated, we'll do whatever council directs us to do. And so if we do a report for February 22nd, it would look at potentially, you know, the option of the town initiating a petition for a municipal drain.
Excellent, thank you. And perhaps while we have you on mic, you can answer Councillor Hahn's question as to the difference between engineers and the specialty drainage engineers.
Yeah, so certainly I think the engineer from RJ Burnside is Sid Vanderveen. He used to work with the Ministry of Agriculture, Rural and Rural Affairs, Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs for many years as their drainage coordinator and drainage specialist in the ministry. So he's very well known in the field of municipal drainage and, you know, fairly regarded in that respect. But anybody, if we were to go forward and do a municipal drain, we would go, you know, have to hire someone who has that expertise and knowledge. The processes under the Drainage Act are fairly specific that need to be followed when you start to establish a municipal drain. So you'd want to hire somebody who has that expertise. And not all engineers have that expertise.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Madam Director. Any other questions, comments on the motion? Let's go to Councillor Wink.
Yes, so if we're going down the path of petitioning for a municipal drain, that becomes a cost to the town of Pelham. This whole thing was created by others other than the town of Pelham, be it legally through testamentary trust, but this is the reason why they pulled testamentary trust out of the Planning Act and disallowed it, because this is one of the results of those testamentary trusts. The reason why we asked for a drainage study is to identify the exact problems. We're not committing ourselves to paying or rectifying those problems. We're identifying what those problems are and who should potentially be responsible for those problems. I think while I understand the motion and whatever, like, I tend to agree with Councillor Hahn and Councillor Stewart that we shouldn't be committing dollars at this point in time. Not to say that we might not later on down the road, but from where I sit right now, like, we're trying to help these people out, but is it our obligation to pay for it? And I don't believe it's our obligation to, as a town, to go out and pay for a municipal drain.
Okay, thank you for those words, Councillor. If I could ask Mr. CAO, when we had this last in front of Council, I believe Council authorized the spending of $50,000 for an engineering study, drainage study. Am I correct on that?
You are, sir. That's in the 2022 budget.
Yes. Okay, so this council basically has already wanted, okayed a study that basically has already been done by the Sid Vanderveen. So I guess my question to anyone who doesn't want to vote on the motion, you don't want to take advantage of a study that's already been done, and yet we're going to spend $50,000 on another study. So I don't quite understand where that goes, but obviously everyone's entitled to the votes. Any other councillor? Yes, Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The last paragraph of the motion says, Council, consider the staff report on the town initiating a petition for a municipal drain in that area. I don't think we should be doing that at this point. There are legal issues that need to be resolved, and I'm in full agreement with Councillors Wink and Hahn. You know, possibly down the road, it will be determined that Pelham should pay for or partially pay for. But until the litigation is complete, I don't think the town of Pelham should get involved. It could set a terrible precedent for anybody who's got any drainage issues in their backyard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I thought I saw Councillor Hahn's hand.
Yes, through the mayor. As far as the previous motion that you mentioned, I think a couple meetings back with regards to the engineering study, the 50,000, I think it was. I don't believe I was one of the councillors that agreed to that. So with your question, Mayor, with regards to the the perplexity of why I would be questioning this now, I'm still holding fast to the questioning that I asked several meetings ago.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments on the motion? If not, I will turn to the clerk and ask her to call the vote.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, this vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Councillor Hahn.
No.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion has been defeated.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next motion, and we do have a motion from Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stewart, if you wish, you may read into the record.
Yes, thank you, Holly. Whereas the town of Pelham is committed to building strong communities and enhancing communication and engagement with its residents. And whereas the Town of Pelham Senior Advisory Committee regularly meets to discuss ongoing issues affecting seniors. And whereas the Pelham Senior Advisory Committee wishes to provide opportunity to comment on proposed developments within the community which relate directly to seniors, such as residential retirement homes, age-in-place communities, and long-term care facilities. Now therefore be it resolved that Council for the Town of Pelham direct staff to investigate potential options on how the Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee may provide input on proposed developments within the community which relate directly to seniors, and that staff report back by April 4th, 2022. It says 21 on the sheet.
Thank you. I shall correct that.
Councillor Stewart, any further comments on your motion?
No, not really. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's just the seniors, of which some of us are members, we're the ones that are going to be, affected by the development of these things in the not too distant future. So I think the seniors really need an opportunity to have dialogue with the developers to, for exchanges of information, just, to possibly even ease their minds. It goes along with a motion I proposed a long time ago about meetings with developers, community meetings with developers before anything really got, shovels in the ground to make it work. I think this is just a good idea for everyone.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Hildebrand, you seconded the motion. Any comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. I was a member of the Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee for a couple terms before I became a councillor. They were a very experienced professional group of individuals that had a lot of knowledge. And I think any person that can provide input with regards to what seniors need and seniors in housing would really benefit the community. And with all the new buildings occurring and all the seniors that are in the town, I think it would be very beneficial for the developers to hear from these individuals, as it would really help their development plans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And we'll open it to any other councillor comments on this motion. Councillor Hahn.
Yes, through the mayor, I think it's a great idea. I also think that considering we've heard recently from Mountain View regards to the buildings behind, well, I'm sure there's a name for the exact development, but behind where the old McDonald's would be on Highway 20, that area there, I guess to the east of Sobeys in that area, that I think that would be wonderful that if it's possible, there can be some conversations had there with the Seniors Advisory Committee as that, get into the ground level of the planning there. So it's a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Not seen any. I'll turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next motion to move into in camera. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor. Oh, I apologize. I apologize to Councillor Kaur. We do have a notice of motion being presented by Councillor Kaur.
Councillor?
Yes, thank you. Last week, St. Catherine's Council passed a motion to end harassment of elected officials. They asked that all other councils throughout the Niagara region join them by supporting them with the same motion for something to the same. We need to stop the rock throwing through front windows. We need to stop the painting of graffiti on cars and homes. We need to stop putting untrue statements on Facebook. We need to stop the bullies with a pen who target certain councillors and belittle them on a regular basis. None of these people bring value to our community. What they bring is division, they bring hate, but most of all, they bring hurt. They bring hurt to our wives, they bring hurt to our husbands, they bring hurt to our sons and daughters. And that's why I think it's very important that we support St. Catharines and we make a motion to stop the hate in our communities.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Corr needs a seconder.
Oh, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh,
this
I'm
is-
sorry.
This is just
Oh, this is
a
just a
notice of
motion.
motion, and his
Yep.
motion will be in full on the next agenda,
Right.
but you're certainly right, he will need a seconder for
Yep,
that.
I'm getting ahead of myself. Well, very good. Thank you, Councillor Corr.
Thank you. And now that brings us to moving into closed session, and I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider the following. E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before the administrative tribunals affecting the municipality, and F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. It is one item, file numbers LO101-2022 and LO102-2022, development application. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Okay, any discussion on this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. And the vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. If council can give the clerk's department a moment to stop the streaming and the recording, that would be appreciated.
Yep, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can see that we do have the live streaming and the recording back up, and therefore I do have a motion put forth from Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Corr. Be it resolved that council adjourn the in-camera session and do now rise with no report. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, any discussion on this? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This begins with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, your next item on the agenda is the confirming bylaw, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and do pass, being bylaw number 4425-2022, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 7th day of February 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Any discussion on the bylaw? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting of council scheduled for February 22nd, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Any discussion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Corr.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. It is 7:59 p.m. and you can gavel out your meeting.
Good night, everyone.
Nay.
Holly, it just occurred to me, oops.
One moment. Yes.
That when I